Tramps, but Drink Tramps is a very popular show. Noriega, he seems like a nice guy. I don't know him directly. I was on the phone. I was on a conversation with him one time, and he seemed nice enough in that conversation. And so Nori is a guy that he said something that I thought was like really profound, and it sort of made me say, okay, you know what? Let me sort of watch what he has to say, and I'm going to share the clip in a minute so you guys can take a look at it. And because I really think it's worth sort of thinking about in terms of just understanding how business can work, right? And just really one of the key elements of capitalism is that you kind of have the pimp game kind of happening when it comes to capitalism. You have a lot of individuals that end up feeling exploited and sort of tricked and cheated and things like that. And I'm not one to say that that did not happen to you. I'm just one to say that if you don't sort of avoid it and sort of learn the game, then it's going to keep happening, right? And in fact, if you want to protect your children from that kind of abuse, from capitalist exploitation, then it's essential, in my view, that you educate them on wealth and capitalism at an early age, right? Like, I don't think sort of popping up and expecting them to kind of figure it out is the best approach. I think that you pretty much have to just sort of commit yourself to the idea that very early that, look, if I want my kids to be ready for the world, I need to get them ready, right? If I don't get them ready, then someone will take advantage of them. They will Jeffrey Epstein your child, and next thing you know, they'll be sitting there angry and sad and upset and all this other stuff. In fact, you guys, I've mentioned this a couple of times before. One of the members of New Edition is actually in our stock market class, and I didn't know he was in there, but when I thought about New Edition, I remember that crazy story where they did that world tour and they got a check after the tour was over. They got a check for like $1.87. Anybody remember that? It was pretty crazy, and I think that that's wrong, right? Like you shouldn't be able to do that to people, but it happens all the time, right? So ultimately, what I would say is, when we talk about, why artists get screwed by labels, I think the question should be, how do we stop the screwing from happening, right? Labels are not going to change their behavior. It's not just labels; it's really a lot of businesses. You could have the same conversation about predatory lenders. You could talk about big pharma. You could talk about just corporate America in general. Corporate America screws you, right? And what I have observed, in my humble opinion, as a guy who studies finance for a living, is that capitalism doesn't really care a lot about your feelings. If you can be tricked into believing that they care about your feelings, then that makes you easy to exploit. For example, there's that book, "An Empire of Their Own: How the Jews Invented Hollywood." And it's not anti-Semitic. It's just a really great book about how the ingenuity of the Jewish community and how they built this thing called Hollywood. And in this book, they literally say that like they created all these award shows just so the actors wouldn't ask for more money. They were like, okay, we don't want to give them money, so let's give them symbolism. Let's do them like they do black people in every election. Let's not give them anything substantive that they can take to the bank. Let's just give them symbolism. Let's take advantage of the void in their self-esteem and let them feel good, distract them with bright, shiny objects. Anybody ever heard that saying where they say that something like if you give them bread in circuses, the people will never rebel? Anybody heard that before? It's like the saying's literally thousands and thousands of years old, I think. Right? They're just like, yeah, yeah, just give people a show. Just give them some dope or dopamine. Isn't that funny to call it dope? Give them some dope and give them some dope and some hope and some soap on a rope, and then they'll never come asking for money. Right? That almost sounded like bars. I should be a rapper. Man, T.I., you better look out, man. Don't start a battle with me, man, because I might get you. But seriously, give them some dope and hope and soap on a rope, and they'll never come asking for money. They'll never come asking for the real wealth because you gave them the fake, right? You gave them something that made them feel good, and that is a replacement in their mind for what actually makes sure that they are good. So really, I would encourage you as a consciousness exercise when you're deciding, like, okay, I voted for this politician, is this better for me? I made this move, is this really better for me? I think looking at quality of life is really where you want to start, right? Is your life actually better? Can you feed your kids more effectively? Do you feel financially safe? Do you feel free? All these other things. Do you feel happy and fulfilled? If the answer is yes, then that's great. But if it's no, then you got to sit back, take a step back, breathe, have a consciousness exercise with yourself, and say, okay, what's the disconnect here? What's the problem? All right. So let me go. Let me share this. I'm gonna go to my Instagram right now. Let's do a quick little digital field trip. And by the way, Chanel is in the chat. I know you're sharing your link. And so what I want to do is I'm going to grab that link and share your links again, Chanel, for coin. If you want to learn stock options, Chanel is a person that can get you a discount. So here we go. Thank you, Chanel, for the link. I appreciate it. I'm gonna share this with everybody that's watching outside of the Zoom. All right. So here's my Instagram. My Instagram is Dr. Boyce Finance, and I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna share this clip of Noriega speaking, and then we're going to analyze this because I think it's really worth sort of taking a look at and thinking through. All right, so here, oh, this is just something I put up. This was, I just put this up because you see here, you got the lady, her fire is lit, and this guy has matches, so he's like, I will keep lighting your fire, but you don't want me. You're chasing after this guy, this cool guy on the motorcycle who's got the fire extinguisher, who's gonna like put your fire out, and then you're gonna go through life bitter and angry because you picked the wrong person. And that's another thing that therapy helps you to do is therapy helps you stop becoming your own worst enemy. That's one thing that therapy did for me was I didn't even realize that I was recreating trauma from my childhood over and over and over again. And I'll be like, why do I keep ending up in these dumb situations? And I was like, oh, it's because I'm operating to some extent as a dumb, unhealed person, right? And here I had a whole PhD and I didn't know how dumb I had a PhD and I was dumb, right? So ain't nobody perfect. Ain't nobody got it all figured out. Don't ever in a million years fall for an illusion that I'm somehow presenting myself as a guy who has it all together. No, I am figuring it out. So this is real. This is heavy, right? This is just, I know this is not directly financially related, but if you know finances, you know it actually is related. There have been many people who've been ruined in bad relationships, ruined not just financially, but ruined in other ways. I saw the story of there was a beautiful. I told you, I might have told you all this story before I get to Noriega. Let me tell you the story because I think it's a worthy financial discussion. There was a lady who I saw. I can't remember her name. Damn it! She sang the first words of the song were like, "Look at me." And it's like something like I'm happy as a bird in a tree. Tell me who she is, because I watched this, I saw her sing. I said, man, this lady sings so beautifully. It was like a video from the 1940s, and all these white people when she just said, was it Nancy Wilson? Okay, I don't know, maybe it was, I don't know, but she or Ella Fitzgerald. I don't know who. See, I'm seeing Ella, Nancy, Misty. I don't know. It was from the 1940s. Anyway, so she just says, "Look at me," and all the people start clapping, and she keeps singing. And lo and behold, Sarah Vaughn. I think that's who it was. I think it was Sarah Vaughn. And check this out. So I was like, man, this lady, it was like 3:30 in the morning. I'm doom scrolling. And I just became intrigued with this lady's beautiful voice and all these white people in the audience clapping for her in the 1940s. And I said, who's this person? And I wanted to hear their story because every artist has a story, right? There's the story of like when I was just struggling and I was a regular person, and then maybe one night I went to the Apollo and suddenly everyone saw how talented I was, and then you get signed by a label and you become famous, and then you have ups and downs that come with that, right? Sometimes it ends tragically, sometimes it doesn't, but it usually kind of does this, right? To some extent, right? So I wanted to know her story, like what was her drama, what was her personal life. And let me check to tell you this lady became world famous because she sang so well. I believe it was Sarah Vaughan. That's for some reason my gut's telling me that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It was a beautiful black woman. We got a lot of beautiful black women that can sing. And I read her story about her husbands. She was married like I think three times, and two out of the three times she had accumulated a whole lot of wealth, and she trusted her husband to manage the money. And her husband has some vice, like it might be gambling or women or both, and they literally wiped her out. Like she got wiped out like twice. It was insane. It was crazy. And so what happened in my view was like maybe she was taught something early about like trust your man, give him all your money, let him do whatever, even without properly vetting. Like before you invest, you must investigate. But instead, maybe it's like I fall in love and I'm leading with my emotion. So therefore, I'm just gonna go ahead and sign off everything and let him do whatever he wants, and then I get wiped out. And I've seen men get wiped out by women too. So it's not just a gender specific thing. So let's stop acting like it's like a man against woman thing. It's really just a human thing. And so by not being able to confront that deficiency that led her to keep trusting men with all of her money, um, that is that's something that you just we all kind of have that. We all kind of have that deficiency. A lot of times it'll start with our parent. A lot of times, like for example, the opposite sex parent. That's why I worry so much about how many black women grow up without their father in the house, because that relationship with the opposite sex parent has a huge impact on your decision making going, in throughout life. Right. And so ultimately you got to fix those things. You got to identify them so they can so it's almost like course correcting your car. You keep steering to the left and you don't know why, and then somebody says, "Oh, it's because your steering column's not working." So you fix it. The next thing you know, you're going down the path you really want to go instead of thinking that you're going straight when really you're veering to the left every time, right? So anyway, with that said, let me share this with you. So just know that that's an investing thing. There have been people who've been killed by their partner. I mean, doing really well financially, and both of them had plenty of money, and somebody got murdered or whatever. It's like these are real stories. Somebody in this class, a lady doing very well financially, Robin Simpson, she was a leader of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority down in Houston, was murdered by her husband, stabbed over 100 times in front of their 8-year-old daughter Essence. This happened in Houston 2.5 years ago, and what angers me, I'm gonna be honest with you, it drives me crazy that something like this can happen and nobody cares. But yet a white lady gets shot in Minneapolis and suddenly we're all in tears. But this lady, this black woman, this amazing black woman, I met her. She came to the All Black National Convention in Houston in 2019 with her husband. I met her husband, this son of a bitch. He stabs her 100 times in front of their daughter, and nobody in the black community is protesting. There's no outrage. There's nothing. But yet, they say something on CNN. Suddenly, everybody's all up in arms. Like, stop that. Stop letting people tell you when to be outraged. You should decide personally when something is outrageous to you. It is very outrageous to me that this happened to her, and I hate this. So anyway, let me keep going. Y'all didn't come here to hear me talk about that, but this does relate to wealth because she and her husband live in a nice house in a nice suburb. So don't you ever think that a relationship is good just because you got plenty of money. I think that would be a lesson to pick up there. All right, so let's move on. Let's go to Noriega's video. I'm gonna share my audio. Let me know if you can hear the audio. I'm sorry, I'm choking. I'm choking and yapping and at the same time. Sorry. So here's the video. Let me play it. Let me know if you can hear.
Hip
Did
hop.
you have, do you have
Hold on.
a, do you have a 401k?
You want me to explain to you what hip hop is?
That's what I'm
All right,
trying to
let
get
me
to.
explain to you what hip hop is. The worst loan you could ever make. When you sign to a major label, that money that they give you, let's say they give you 800 grand, right? That's a loan. You have to pay back that loan with interest. So if you don't make back that 800 grand, what they do is they put you in the red, but you can still be hot and you didn't make back that 800 grand. So you can still be hot. So they'll give you another album and they'll give you, instead of 800 grand, they'll give you 1.2 this time, right? So now, but you're still in the hole for that 800. You understand? But you got another 1.2. And if you don't make that, then you're just in the red for both. And this is a loan with interest that you don't get nothing out of. Hip hop is not meant for the artist to win. It's never been meant for the artist to win. And the more and more you learn, the more and more you read your contracts, the more and more it's disturbing. Ain't no picture in hip hop, brother.
Do you have a,
Okay, all right. Did y'all catch that? Did y'all hear that? All right. So shout out to Noriega for educating people on this. I think it's really important because we have so many talented people in our community, and I think that one of the Scooby Doo mysteries that we should solve is how in the world is it that black people have all the talent but don't get the money? Other people end up with the money, and we end up with all the headaches and the debt and everything else. It doesn't make any sense. It's not logical. And if you recall, it doesn't just happen to the untalented artists or the unknown artists. It happens to really talented people. Prince, he wrote the word slave on his face, right? Remember that? And he basically talked about, how his label pretty much controlled his release schedule, owned his masters, stuff like that. So even somebody as powerful as Prince felt like a slave. Michael Jackson complained a lot about the labels back in the day. TLC sold millions of records, and they still end up declaring bankruptcy after selling all those records. Taylor Swift has, I think she re-recorded her whole album just so she could own the masters. And in fact, her catalog, I think, was sold like without her approval or something. They sold it to a third party and didn't even ask her if that was okay. So, so what this comes down to a lot of times is the difference in the perspectives of the artist versus the organization, right? The organization is not thinking about how great the music is and how much they enjoy the concert. They're thinking about the bottom line and the profitability. And the artist, maybe the artist has dreams of being famous and being on stage. So that you're distracted by all that, right? Especially with the rappers, they're distracted with the booty and the bling and some drugs and whatever, right? And I think the drug part, I wouldn't be surprised if that was deliberate. I think that someone who wants to control an artist, I can see why they would want that person on drugs. Because if you're a drunk and a drug addict, then and as long as they can get you on stage and get you to perform, then they kind of have you under control. Or maybe they blackmail you, like you saw what was going on with at Diddy's house. Like, why'd you have all those cameras in there? Like, what's going on? Well, Epstein and all these people, they blackmail individuals. They find your vice, they find your flaw, they find your deficiency, they exploit it, right? If your deficiency is I sleep with dudes or kids or something crazy, right? Whatever, right? They'll get all that, film it, and then they can use that to control you and blackmail you. I think that's a common behavior in my opinion, right? So anyway, with that being said, here are a few variables that pop into these contracts. A lot of you have very talented kids. We have a daughter that's tall and gorgeous and smart and dances and sings and acts everywhere. Every time she does an audition, they always point her out. They always say, "Oh my gosh, she's as pretty as her mama." And I told you when I met her mom, she was the prettiest woman I ever seen in my life. So her girls and her kids inherited all those great genetics, and so ultimately understanding business is really important. I always say, well, make sure you understand the money. You have to understand the business side and what's going on instead of just understanding how to get on the stage. You got to understand how the stage was built and how the stage was financed, because those are the people that actually have the power, not the person on the stage. So there are a few things that happen in these deals that are problematic. One is they have these weird recoupment structures, right? And so the so the label will be like, we're going to give you $1 million, but all that money is like a complete loan. And then they just totally screw you on the back end by taking out all this money for all these expenses that happen to be money paid to shell companies that they also own, right? Or you're paying it directly to the studio, right? So everything from the marketing and the videos and the stylists and the tour support and administrative expense, all these other, like they literally will be like, here's $1 million, but we're going to charge you 2 million because we need you in debt so we can control you, force you to make a bunch of albums for us, and we're gonna just milk you like a cow. And it's similar. It reminds me of those factories where they do, raise the cows and the chickens just so they can feed them to other people. Because it's like we will literally drain you to the point where you're damn near dead, like financially and otherwise. And then after we get done with you, we'll find another big juicy cow and start draining him. And so a lot of artists can go platinum and still be in debt, right? That's very easy math actually. For example, this happens in a lot of entertainment spaces. Like, did you all know that what is it? Harry Potter, Warner Brothers swears that Harry Potter still hasn't made a profit yet. Did you all know that? Like, they literally still say that the Harry Potter series has not made a profit, and basically that's because they pretty much, Kendall says it sounds like sharecropping. It's exactly like sharecropping because sharecropping is kind of like it's one of these things where they were like, okay, how do we control the labor supply? Right? There are these things called human rights where we can't do humans like we do animals, but that's really what they want to do. They really want to control you like a farm pig. How would a farmer control pigs? You build a big ass cage or whatever, put fences up, and you keep them in there pig pens and their cages, and you shock them when they go too far off the property, right? You know, or with cattle, you herd them like the ranchers do, and you lasso them when they run away, right? And so you sheepdogs, you know, these overseer sheepdogs to keep them under control. That's how you control the herd. Well, here's your reality check with capitalism. You are the herd. Like when you are the consumer, the renter, the employee, you're part of the herd. The problem is they can't tell you that you're the herd because that's going to hurt your feelings and make you upset because that would be a violation of your human rights. So rather than them telling you that they're violating your human rights, they just do it in a different way so that you won't identify what the process actually is. You'll somehow even come to the conclusion that you're in that situation solely because you made the wrong decisions when that's certainly part of it, but a lot of it's because they built the cage for you to walk right into. So you did walk into the cage, and but they built it and they made the cage look like a refrigerator or something. I don't know. They made the cage look like a beach or something, right? So in a way, it's like oppression tends to be a two-way street, I find. You have to have kind of a cooperative process, like with the sheep when they're or the cows when they're trying to get the cows to go down so they can get their heads chopped off and slaughtered. The cows are the ones actually doing the walking, but they're kind of guiding the cow. Do you see what I mean? Like this is what I visualize when I look at capitalism. You're the cow. They're guiding you, and you're moving under your own energy. But they're kind of telling you, like, hey, look, go over here. Here's a piece of meat. Here's a carrot, whatever, right? So you're like chomp, 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 and next thing you know, right, right? You're just like, wait, what happened? I didn't sign up for this. So because they told you that even with the cows, I think with some of the animals, I don't know much about slaughtering animals, but I know that one of the animals they said that they will cover their eyes so they don't so the pig behind you doesn't see what happened to the pig in front of it. Because they said if the pigs in the back start seeing what's going on, they'll be like, oh hell no. Right, so they cover their eyes. So anyway, let me get back to it. Let me stop using these sick analogies. But I think that they're realistic in terms of understanding what really can happen in a capitalist society. So here's the problem. They can't say that to you. They can't say that the most profitable thing we can do is herd you like cattle, incarcerate you, lock you down, so we can force you down a certain path. So they have to find these other loopholes, these other ways to do it. So one of them might, for example, be the loophole in the 13th Amendment that says you know slavery is illegal unless you've been convicted of a crime. Well, there we go. There's our out, right? Because we can change laws. We can make anything illegal, right? We can criminalize anybody. You know, we just find the thing that you like to do the most, and then we make that into somehow we decide that that's going to be that's dangerous and terrible, and we're going to lock you up because, and of course, you deserve whatever you get because you're a criminal, right? We've labeled you that, right? That's one thing, and everybody does this. I've seen it done, Democrats and Republicans. You know, even in the last election, when everyone said Trump is a criminal, I was like, yeah, I get it. But I've seen people on both sides do crimes that are kind of equally bad. And I don't really know how much people are going to react to the fact that he slept with a lady and paid her $50,000. I don't know if that's the worst thing he's ever done. You know, it's kind of like getting Al Capone on tax evasion. Like, yeah, he probably did evade taxes, but that's not the worst thing Al Capone did. So some people aren't going to buy it, right? That's how I honestly saw it. You know, and it happens on both sides of the house. It's not Democrat, Republican, but you can really label anybody a criminal if you want to, you know. And so anyway, with that said, though, it's like so that's one loophole. What's another loophole? Well, other loopholes might be debt, right? If you get trapped under enough debt, then then the debt itself will incarcerate you and force you to have to go to work, right? Or if you have too many bills. Think about how many people go to work every day and you say, well, why don't you take the day off? And they say, well, I have to go to work. And you say, well, wait, you don't have to do anything. And they say, yeah, but I have to. Well, why do you have to? Because I got bills or because I got debt. I got to pay this debt back, right? So to some extent, I would argue that the record labels do that with the artists. They want to find something that's going to contain you and control you. And that ability to contain and control you is typically connected to how to how little consciousness you have about what they're doing to you, right? Like the pig, if you imagine a pig with a really high IQ who analyzes the farm and the system and looks to see what's happening with the pigs in front of him, that pig's gonna run away. That pig's gonna be like, oh hell no, I ain't participating. I got a bigger purpose out here. I'm not supposed to be getting my head chopped off in this conveyor belt. But imagine the pig who has no consciousness, right? The typical pig, right? Who's just gonna, you put some food in front of him. He's gonna go over and eat the food, right? You give him a little shock. He's gonna go the direction that he's told. You tell him all the other pigs are going this way. He's gonna follow the pig. Look at how many humans live that way. Many humans follow the crowd. They just do stuff not because they know why they're doing it. They do it because that's what somebody else did before them. Like who'd you vote for in the last election? So and so. Well, why? Well, because that's what my family does. We've always voted for this party or this type of person, or we've always gone to church. We've always gotten jobs. We've always done XYZ at Christmas. We see, do you understand? A lot of times we will follow the crowd, or we'll see something that's trendy and just do it because it's trendy. That's trend. It being trendy is enough for us to want to do it, and that's very dangerous because then the person that's conscious of how all that works is going to say, okay, so if I want you to do something, all I got to do is make it trendy, and then you're just going to do what the trend says, right? This is why I was so upset with hip hop music making drugs popular again, because a lot of 17, 16-year-olds are just trying to fit in. They're gonna try meth and Percocets and whatever because their favorite artist told them it was trendy. Next thing you know, you got a 17-year-old drug addict whose brain is permanently disabled because his brain's not even fully developed. It won't be developed until it's 25. So you've literally disrupted his brain development, which is going to cause all kinds of mental health issues and psychosis long after he stops using drugs. See, nobody talks about this. This bothers me though. Nobody talks about how many times you see somebody where they're like, "Oh, it wasn't the drugs that caused him to go crazy. He's bipolar." Well, if you use a lot of heavy drugs most of your life, it's gonna disrupt your brain chemistry. So they're not disconnected. It's not like you just got unlucky and it just happened to occur. No, no, no. There were things that occurred early that may be causing side effects later on. Like the reason he has the Parkinson's is because he was partying with the cocaine back in the 1990s, right? So I'm not saying this is true in every case. I'm saying that sometimes I don't know if we connect the dots the way we should. With that said, though, the ability to contain people in a capitalist system really comes down to taking what they want or taking advantage of their deficiency emotionally, otherwise. Oh, you want to be famous, or you want to be liked. Oh, you want girls. Here's some girls for you. You want drugs. Here's some drugs for you. All these little vices allow them to contain and control you, right? So the devil's always looking for your deficiency. The devil's in the deficiencies, and he's swimming around trying to find something that he can do to use you, to get you to do what he wants you to do. Like the pimp who loves the little girl with daddy issues because then she's calling the pimp daddy, and the pimp, literally that's a term, pimp daddy. Y'all know this term, right? Now, sex trafficking has been very big in hip hop for a long time. I don't know why everybody act like Diddy's the only one who did it. 50 Cent made that documentary about Diddy, and I said, it's really weird he's making this documentary because he's been promoting pimp culture his whole entire career. He had a song called PIMP, right? So wait a minute. So now he's the good. Wait, no, 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 no. This whole culture is toxic. Like, what are you talking about? But anyway, with that said, let's move on. So back to the pimp game. Another thing that record labels do to artists is they typically own the masters. And so that means that they control the licensing, streaming revenue, sync deals, long-term catalog value, etc. So the artist is the face of the music. He's like a mascot, but they don't actually own the core of the asset. Third, royalty rates tend to be just really crazy. They tend to favor the label. So the artist might get a percentage of the revenue, but that's after a lot of deductions and uh, breakage streaming calculations, whether those are cross collateralization, right? So there's like all this stuff that the 19-year-old artist doesn't know about, but he just wants to be famous, so he'll sign anything, right? So that lack of consciousness. becomes an asset for the 50-year-old trying to get the 19-year-old to sign this contract. 360 deals, those are crazy. So basically that's where they take a piece of everything, right? A lot of modern contracts let labels take a percentage of your touring, your merch, etc. Even income streams that they had no role in creating. 360 deals tend to be the devil. One of the most intelligent, conscious artists I know very well, D1. D1 actually achieved the goal. He's the only artist I've ever met who turned down an opportunity to sign with Cash Money Records with Lil Wayne and Baby and all them down in New Orleans. They offered him an opportunity. He didn't want to be a part of that. And I said, good for you. That's so smart. Most people couldn't do that. Most people would just be excited about being next to Drake and all this other stuff that they wouldn't actually see the bigger picture. And then he signed another deal with another record label, and he was smart enough to walk away. He said, "Wait a minute, they're taking a percentage of everything, and they're not even doing anything. They're just, they in this contract, they're controlling what I'm allowed to do." And we talked about it, and I said, "No, actually, here's how you develop a business model that actually works for you." And now D is independent, but he's doing a great job. He's got almost 1 million followers on Instagram. He's I don't know how much money he has. He makes a lot of it, but I did tell him, I said, if you no matter how much money you make, I don't think you should tell anybody because that can be a problem that draws unwanted attention. And fortunately, his ego isn't built around how much money he has, and he seems happier as an artist that's actually free. So there are ways to build your business model around what you do. But one thing about conversations that I would have with him and a couple other people I'm thinking about is we don't really talk about the music, right? The quality of the music is a given. I assume you're going to make a dope album. What we talk about is business. Talk about marketing and strategy and positioning and distribution and like that. Those are the things that matter. That's the secret sauce. That's the secret sauce. When people use the term rich and famous, they assume that the word rich must automatically come with famous. They assume that if you're famous enough, you'll automatically be rich. That's not true. That's why you have people that have 1 million followers on Instagram who can't pay the rent. So rich and famous don't automatically sync together. They're not like peanut butter and jelly. Just because your sandwich got peanut butter on it, don't mean the jelly came to the show. You got to go buy the jelly in order to add that to the jelly. Then you got peanut butter and jelly. So don't assume if I get enough peanut butter that the jelly will arrive. Life does not work that way. So in entertainment, what black children should understand very clearly when they're going into the entertainment space is every single piece of the entire process, production, distribution, monetization, everything from when the album's made in the studio to how it gets into the ear or the hands of the customer, and until the point where the money gets deposited into the bank account. That's what the other cultures that are less talented than us, that's what they're training their children on. That's why Clive Davis, there's only one Whitney Houston, but Clive Davis has had several hundred artists that have come through his life that have made money for him. Whitney had Whitney, she had herself, she was making money from herself as herself, and that was pretty much it. One revenue stream, one person, one situation. Whereas the people on the higher consciousness scale of the business model, like the Clive Davises, they're just looking for a new Whitney Houston every year, right? They're looking for a new Rick James or whatever. In fact, Rick James, did y'all ever hear that funny story about Rick James and how he lost his contract? So Rick James was he was that again, talk about those vices that can destroy your wealth. His issue was the cocaine. And so Rick James would get this massive amount of money whenever he made an album. His last album had given him, $40 million or something crazy. And so they had an agreement where when he finished his album, they would give him a check for $1 million, and then he would do the rest. And then as the album went out, he would get more money from royalties and all that. So his previous album had not done as well. I think he only made 13 million instead of the 40 million he made from the first one. And so Rick was annoyed. He felt like the record label wasn't doing its job. They weren't promoting his album. So he basically turns in his record. They give him a check for $1 million. And Rick gets on, he starts yelling at the executive and cussing him out and saying, sell my mother ucking record, sell my mother ucking record. And then he stands up on the desk, or he puts a big pile of cocaine on the desk. He snorts all this cocaine on the guy's desk. Then he jumps on the desk and he pulls out his penis and puts his penis in the guy's face and says, "Sell my other ucking record," right? So the guy just sits there, and Rick James eventually like leaves, and then he says to Rick's manager, he says, "Go get me Lionel Richie. Go get me Lionel Richie." because Lionel Richie, because he didn't I don't know what it's like to work with him. I've never met him, but I'm gonna guess that what he's probably thinking is, okay, we can make anybody famous. If you have talent, the black community has an oversupply of talented artists, right? You're not the only one. And so he's probably thinking, okay, let's just get somebody else that has a lot of talent. I don't know if Lionel Richie's as talented as Rick James. It's up to you to decide that, but I know that they're both very good at what they do. And they say, okay, we're just going to put our capital behind this guy instead of putting our capital behind that guy because the capital base is the accelerant of the artist's career. The capital base is the essential ingredient. That's the vehicle that's going to carry you to the land of fame and fortune. It's not just the talent. The talent matters for sure, but the talent is not there's a lot of talent out here. There's a lot of do you know how many unknown super talented rappers I've seen in my life? I've seen artists that are every bit as good as what you hear on the radio. Just that nobody knows them because there's no capital base backing them up, right? So, so they're thinking, okay, there's an oversupply of talented people, but there's only only a few of us that can go raise $100 million and promote this product. So they just said, okay, let's put our capital base behind this Lionel Richie guy. And a lot of the reason I suspect that they would pick a Lionel Richie, and I would pick him too. I wouldn't want somebody snorting cocaine on my desk, cussing me out, and then putting their penis in my face. Like, what the hell? But this was ego. This was drugs. This was Rick James's personal what's the word? I'd say moral failing, if you will, or personality quirk, problematic quirk that led him to think that he was powerful enough where he could do something like that. And I've seen it happen all the time where someone gets a little fame and their ego starts to explode because they overestimate their contribution to the success. Right? They call this, there's a term for this in psychology. They call this self attribution bias. Self attribution bias is that you are biased when you make an assessment of what role you played in the success of the team. When the team's winning and you're the star, the temptation is for you to think that you did it by yourself and you didn't need nobody and that you the man and everybody needs to bow at your feet. And that's not a healthy way to do business ever. That is an incredibly unhealthy way to do business. And the bias also, though, is when things go wrong, as they did with Rick James, where his album didn't do as well as his second album didn't do as well as his first. His other bias is that when things go wrong with self attribution bias, you're more likely to blame others. Professor David Hirschleifer, who was on my dissertation committee, he wrote research papers on this topic actually because he talked about it when it comes to investing. The reality is that most human beings are quick to take credit for their wins, but they're quick to blame others for their failures. Self attribution bias. That's why when you ask me and you say, hey, how did Ohio State do today in the game? If they win, I say, we won. And I put on my OSU jacket. But if they lose, I say, oh, they lost. Well, how is it a we when they're winning, but it's a they when they're losing? Even I do that. We all do that, right? Like so when the Buckeyes lose, it's like, yeah, they lost, man. They suck today, right? But when they win, it's like, oh, we were great. We caught touchdown passes. We were flying down the field. We did an amazing job. They couldn't stop us, right? So self attribution bias kicks in. So anyway, with Rick James, I can see why they'd want to work with a Lionel Richie, obviously, because in the world of business and big capital, conservatism tends to win the day. Remember, I told you that wealth preservation is the number one goal of the wealth builder, and capital preservation requires a conservative preservative. I don't know the right word. Preservation based mindset. So when you're thinking that way, you don't really want the guy who's whacked out on drugs, who's cussing people out and doing crazy stuff. You want the guy who's going to be consistent and be a reliable, decent business partner. That's why that's why therapy will make you a better business person. Therapy and healing and dealing with your trauma will make you a better, it will open economic opportunities for you because people with money will sit down and have a meeting with you and they'll say, I like that guy. I can really work with him. That's really how a lot of wealthy people think. They're not just looking at your talent. And I have seen so many times where I've seen people super talented who don't understand why certain people don't want to talk to them, don't want to work with them. And it's because you're an asshole. You're a terrible person. Nobody wants to work with terrible, unreliable, crazy people, no matter how talented you are. That's why the guy said, "Get me Lionel Richie." I don't know. I don't know the guy. I don't know the circumstances, but I'm thinking he was probably thinking to himself because I see things mathematically sometimes, right? And actually, when you look at and remember, my specialty was asset pricing. So if you can value an artist as an asset because they generate revenue. So if anything that generates revenue can be valued as a financial asset. So if you value the Rick James as a financial asset and the Lionel Richie as a financial asset, the variable that comes into play isn't just how talented they are, it isn't just how famous they are, it isn't just how much money they make. There's another big variable that comes into play called risk, right? So answer me in the chat. If you're an investor and you about to put your $10 million behind an artist, who's riskier? Rick James, the crazy guy who has the drug addiction, who cusses people out and stands on people's desks with his penis out, or Lionel Richie, the guy who just wants to do a good job and is decent and shakes your hand and says, "Hey, how are you? How are the kids?" Right? And stays down to earth. Who's riskier? Right? Rick. Rick is the risky guy. Right? So because one is so if you assume all else is equal, let's say these two guys are about to make the same amount of money. This is exactly how stocks are valued actually. Two assets that are predicted to make the same amount of money, one's risky, one's low risk. The low risk asset is going to have the higher valuation just based on the structure of the model because risk itself reduces the value of an asset. It's a really important financial principle, actually. So that means, and that applies to everything that's of value to you in your life. That means your relationships. That means it means your business partnerships, of course. It all kinds of things, right? So as you make a decision, don't just focus on what something can give you. Focus on the risk, and also present yourself as a low risk option. Present yourself as reliable, sturdy, consistent, a decent human being, a person that's going to bring something positive to the table, that's going to leave your ego at the door. I guarantee you that if you do that and you're showing up with all the talent, everybody's going to want to work with you. Every people will want to partner with you all day, not just because they can make money with you, but because you have, as Sharon says, good character. Good character matters, and I would speculate that part of the. I bet you that if I looked into the history of Rick James's life before he became the famous drug addict, I bet you he's had a lot of unhealed, undiagnosed, untreated trauma. That I bet that the drug there's a deeper reason for all the chaos and the drug use and everything else. A lot of these guys grew up in really difficult circumstances, and my heart goes out to them. So if you heal, I guarantee you it's going to help you in every area of your life. All right. So anyway, I hope I didn't sound too preachy. I hope that this was helpful. And so let's go ahead and finish up for today. Chanel is in the chat. Thank you, Chanel, for popping by. There's the link again if you want to join us for the next cohort of Coin, the Certified Options Investing Network. Also, pretty soon we're going to do a financial slumber party, and I'm putting that together now. And I think I'm going to do something on money and relationships. So you guys will hear about that soon. Make sure you get on the text list for the class if you haven't gotten there yet. You can do that by texting the word morning to the number 87948. So text morning to 87948. And don't forget, we are going to South Africa in May. So if you'd like to join us in South Africa, just go to b1voyages.com. That's b the number one voyages.com. So thank you guys. It was great to see you. Thank you, Chanel, for hanging out, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.